Was so impressed with the people, the caliber of individuals, and just the commitment in making sure LifeSpire and its communities are their best. Okay.
Defining a short story. Well, okay. Over the years, I've talked to people who say, I really can't write. You know, I love to read, but I.
Hello and welcome to Chesapeake Today. It's your Executive Director, David Loop.
And Candace Montgomery, Director of Life Enrichment.
Well, Candace, it's moving into middle and towards the, oh my gosh, I want to say end of September, but oh my God. And in your life, you're always just planning and thinking.
Yeah.
How do you slow time down?
I don't know. If you find out, let me know.
Because
I'm not sure.
I always believe the more you plan, the faster life goes.
That's true.
Things you're looking forward to, and they just boom, 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 boom happen. But you're a planner. You got to be with the role you're doing. I'm the same. Well, first, I want to acknowledge last week, special thanks. You went and spoke to Resident Council.
Yes.
And you were able to connect with them and let Resident Council really get a flavor for where you're heading with the Life Enrichment team and the department and resident services, whichever term you like. But no, nice job, and I think they were really enthused.
Thank you.
And you also announced a new addition coming, at least a couple of them.
Yes, we've really been making some strides in hiring some new team members, so that's awesome. Do you want me to go ahead and
if you'd like,
give a teaser for at least one?
Yeah.
So we have replaced or filled my old position as the fitness director. So Anne
Poirier.
Good job. Wasn't going to botch her there. She will be joining us on October 3rd.
Yeah.
So very excited to have her. You know, residents have been so patient and flexible with the fitness schedule. Just, you know, it's the day in and day out of their normalcy, and it's kind of been shaken up a bit. So
now she's going to be coming from where?
Maine.
All right, now think about the dates. When's Lobster Fest?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think her and Bruce are going to connect on the way down? Maybe they'll run into each other at a roadside rest, never realizing they're going to work together when they're down here. And he says, "Oh yeah, I'm heading to this retirement community, and I got a couple hundred lobsters in my truck."
Right.
And and she didn't have to bring in lobsters. We should. She's the one that should be hauling them. So that's a fascinating future. So yeah, Bruce and. Well, we've got a couple of team members. Kat Register, our Director of HR, is also from New England. So, and I know some of the residents are. So bringing someone from that part of the country. Anne's coming down because she has, adult daughter and grandchild here?
Yeah, she's got 2 daughters here, and then she has a grandson. So lots of stories that are going to come from that, for sure.
Good.
So being close to family is great.
Well, I know you're thrilled to get that position filled. And that's great. And good job.
Yeah,
good for that to happen. So last week we had again a lot happening with the I guess with with Resident Council preparing for Town Hall and us thinking ahead. So that occurred. Just FYI for residents, I didn't really talk about this last week, but again last week, a couple of days I was away. So was Barbara. So was Annette Miller. We were at a retreat. And this is one that was really 3 or 4 years in the making. The LifeSpire Board of Directors had hoped for this retreat to occur sooner, but it really became then part of our strategic planning process this year. So not only were management and home office staff and trustees there, but also resident representatives. So this was I think it's now a biannual resident engagement opportunity where representatives from each of the LifeSpire communities came and met with board leadership, with executive leadership, and then even chatted on their own. So representing us, again, Lois Furman, Travers Mayhew, great for them to be doing this for us on behalf of all of you. And they reported last week at Resident Council and really updated us all on what they had experienced and just so complimentary and energized about what they were part of. And I think that if I would suggest or repeat what Lois said, she was so impressed with the people, the caliber of individuals, and just the commitment in making sure LifeSpire and its communities are their best. So just a little tidbit there about something that did occur and some residents involved in connecting with your board members.
That's awesome, because as a resident, it's just so great that she feels that this investment was, she feels safe and secure, and knowing that folks really have her her best interest out there.
Well, and I think, Lois, Travers, in the past, John, Faye, Mayberry, Tom Sayer, they've all attended these. And again, I think they all have that same common
Yeah,
theme. So
that's great.
need to have ambassadors and storytellers out there in that regard.
Most definitely.
So the other thing, I felt like I'm getting out from a shell because last week I was just like into trying to produce and fine tune our 2023 budget. So yes, residents, it's tons of fun. On one hand, we should be a well-oiled machine, but on the other hand, there's so many changes and intricacies. We try to be accurate, fair, concise. I think it's going to be popping around 27, almost 27.5 million. So it's becoming a sizable budget. And I know you had a big part of it, so you had your first introduction
Yeah,
to
it was
doing a nice
good.
job with your departments.
Thank you.
So more to come, but again, we will go through a process now of the next few weeks of really going through a first draft, second draft, double checking things, making sure our assumptions, inflationary indicators are all correct. And then, of course, towards the end of October is when we really communicate to you, here's the outcome, here's an increase, what it will be, and those letters go out. So between now and November 1st, we can have fun.
Right.
November 1st is not as much fun. So
Oh, goodness.
a little on that.
Right. All right. Well, you want me to go ahead and go into what's happening?
Curious, what all you got?
Yeah, we have a lot this week. It's really jam-packed. So we have Cartier Boutique coming this week on Tuesday. That's Tuesday the 20th in the Chesapeake Room, 1 to 4 p.m. This is that mobile clothing boutique that comes, and residents really enjoy this because not all of them drive or feel confident to be able to go out on the outside and find things and maybe not find the styles that they like. So this is really nice to have here as an offering. Same day, the 20th, we have the evening of prayer, so that will be Uve, Spiritual and Worship Committee, helping out with that. It's at 7 o'clock in the Chesapeake Room. Skip a day, we've got Thursday, the 22nd, Town Hall, 2 p.m. Same evening, or the same day, we have Birthday Bash at 7 p.m. with Higher Ground Band. They have come in the past, big hit, birthday cake, balloons, all kinds of fun things that we've really kind of elevated that birthday bash a little bit. We've got, a big balloon arch and all kinds of special things we've added just to make that extra special.
Are you using helium balloons?
No.
It's
We are
like,
not.
on one hand, I love to see the celebration, but then there's ultimately that one or two balloon that slips up,
Just get
and they
over-
become our ceiling friend
Yeah.
for some
Just
time.
ceiling art,
And again, we can also say we're being good stewards of money because helium is expensive.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no helium. Friday, we're going to have Golden Hour with Bucky, so that's the 23rd. That'll be at 3 p.m. in the Newport Courtyard. So that's been a big hit. Lots of questions when I transitioned into this role. Is Bucky still coming? I mean, the panic and the worry if Bucky can not come anymore. So I had to keep to my word that we'd still have him each month. That Friday as well, we'll have a trip to Virginia Symphony Orchestra. That's at 6:45, leaving from the Hampton entrance.
Okay.
It's kind of jam-packed.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
good stuff.
Definitely.
Great. So do you tell Bucky ahead of time that he's coming to the Chesapeake?
Bucky knows because the day before he usually gets a really good bath.
I was
so
curious
he
about
knows
that.
it's coming. He
Yeah.
knows. And especially if I arrive home earlier than expected, he does this little, I call it the zoomies. He's just zooming around near the door just in circles like he's like, okay, where are we going? Let's go.
Yeah.
Wagging his tail. So
Good.
he knows.
That's great. Well, that's
Yeah.
fun. Well, good things to look forward to. So, with Town Hall, I'm sure we'll have some good discussions and things happen there. Bruce, over the last week, has been having those neighborhood meetings.
Yes.
And they've really gone well. And I appreciate the residents listening to and embracing the fact that we're trying to be good stewards of your dollars. When you think about all the disposables that get thrown away and the cost of that and the whole, it's just, there's an option, and I think you all are embracing that choice that he's given you. So thank you for that, and thank you for listening and really being attentive to what we're trying to do. And it did take a lot of shaping. Resident Council and others formed that, but it's I think will move us to a better place.
Yeah, I attended one of his sessions last week, and it was very informative. Residents had great questions, and there was an informative handout. So I think we're really moving in the right direction with that.
Yeah. It was, and I'll just sort of preface a discussion that also happened last week at Resident Council. And it's one that I want the recycling committee to really get their arms around because that's been in place for a couple years now. and Jim Johnson and Lib Smith and so many, Susan Conley, they've all done a wonderful job of helping to educate residents. And it's, it's such a good thing to do. But then in society today, it's becoming challenging to do the right thing.
Right.
There's not the recyclables that are being purchased and commoditized over in China. What do you do with these recyclables? Then you come up with all these unbelievable standards and there's so many materials.
Right.
Years ago, I remember tin cans, aluminum, and some cardboard.
Yeah,
Pretty easy.
that was it.
Got all this stuff now, and it's a science as to what's recyclable. And our cottage residents have really been caught up with the changes. And I'm talking about over 18 months, multiple times of what day will their trash or recyclables be picked up, because it's a for-profit company we have to contract with. We can't have Newport News. Come on, they won't. It's when we have to contract. And sometimes there are cottage residents saying, is it worth all this?
Right.
So I'm sort of setting the stage for a good discussion and debate as to where can and how do we do something responsibly, but still be cost conscious. So more on that one. I'm sure you'll generate the conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's an update. We're looking ahead. A couple weeks off, of course, lobsters. We've alluded to that with Ann and Bruce's travels, so that's good. Are we ready for some brain?
I have one more thing before brain
Okay.
teaser. So resident Carolyn Katie has been
Yes.
very involved in establishing a book exchange. So that's happening as of this week is a new thing that we have that's going to be on the Hampton second floor lounge. So it's a book exchange. You can go there, take a book, leave a book. So I think that'll be really helpful for residents who, maybe there's some that maybe can't find something they're looking for in the library up here. It'll be a nice alternative that's really within that resident space.
Fantastic.
So,
And I know she's done a nice job of introducing the concept and with a small shelf. We had like this little half shelf over in, Newport 2, second floor. And this came up several months back. Possibility, finally some bookcases available. Got them connected, refinished, looked nice. Hampton 2 Lounge.
yeah.
Carolyn, go at it. I know last week at Resident Council, they're all saying, where's the books? Let's get those
Yeah.
shelves moving. So, Carolyn, I think you'll be ready to go.
Yep.
So people
Very
are looking
nice.
forward to it.
Yeah. All right, now are we ready for brain teaser?
Brain teaser, go
Okay.
ahead.
So we'll recap from last week. So last week's was tough, but everybody got this one this time. What can run but never walks, has a mouth but never talks, has a head but never weeps, and has a bed but never sleeps? A river. You kind of thought that was
I
probably...
knew that one was
You
it,
knew
yeah.
that one.
Now, I was thinking, well, we could put a delta in there and we can do a
Yeah.
few other things. And I was thinking of other little terms. So,
Yeah, everyone got that one. I thought that was going to be a little harder, but just more that you had to pay attention to. All right, so this week's, which tire doesn't move when a car turns right? Which tire doesn't move when a car turns right? Call me, stop me in the hallway. People will stop. Last week they were saying river, just
so now,
randomly.
who was first last week?
Oh, it's still Mr. Litzinger. I found his secret. You want to know his secret?
What's that?
He goes and finds it on the YouTube link before it hits the official air.
Ah,
So
that
he's
sounds
sneaky.
like he is.
Yeah. Because I'll
Okay.
catch an email from him like 12 a.m. or something so
Yeah.
random, like, this isn't airing yet. So I had to call him on it. I said, how are you doing this?
Oh, he
He's like,
bought us.
well,
So he told you.
He
Well,
did,
that's
and he
fun.
said, I know it's a new episode because my outfit is different. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's his secret.
Well, he's being alert, smart, and having fun. But for the
Yeah.
other residents, still catching on these brain teasers,
Yes.
that is good.
Awesome.
Good. All right. Well, that covers that. I know that residents are going to want to hang on and watch our special interview today. I think your efforts, other residents coming forward, wanting to start clubs, wanting to express
Yeah.
their own ideas, creativity, hobbies, interests. And today we're interviewing John Napier. So him and the special writing class,
Yeah, the creative writing
expressions.
club. Yep.
So you're very much going to enjoy listening to John. So stay tuned to the next part of our program. But for now, thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
Hello and welcome back to this portion of Chesapeake Today. It's your Executive Director David Loop, and our special interview today was with one of our newer residents, John Napier. John, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David. It's good of you to invite me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, John, you've been here for how many months now?
About 6 months.
6 months. Well, I remember lovely conversation, came up, visiting your home, which I'm able to do with all residents, and just immediately was fascinated with your background, your family, your kids, and some of their work and how it got connected to here. So much. So why don't we start out, where are you originally from?
I was born in San Diego, California, and I was a Navy brat. And I lived in San Diego for about 2 years. And then my father was on a ship, and he was transferred to Honolulu, or specifically Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
And as I tell people, I like to say that I may be the only Pearl Harbor survivor in the Chesapeake right now, because before I was 4 years old, on a Sunday morning, September 7th, 1941, the Japanese decided to bomb Pearl Harbor, and we were living there. My father was out at sea, fortunately, and my mother was panicked after she figured out those were Japanese Zeros flying overhead, and we lived very close to Hickam Field.
And how old were you then?
I was almost 4.
So 4, and this was back, December 1941. What a date.
Yes.
Yeah?
And anyway, Mom hid me under a bed because she didn't want me to get crushed if they decided to drop a bomb on our house. But anyway, that's one of my claims to fame.
Well, I spent 2 years living in Hawaii. And Hickam Field, know exactly. I used to drive right by it on my way to one of my favorite scuba diving destinations, which is up on the North Shore, infamous Sharks Cove, and or Sunset Beach a little bit further up. But I have fond memories of Honolulu and Hawaii. And when you said Pearl Harbor, I always had this image of what Pearl Harbor was. And then when I lived there, I came to realize this thing is just this huge network of water. There are so many different passages around where the ships were, etc. It's just fascinating seeing that in real life.
Well, to continue with my story, David, as I spent most of my life in Southern California. My wife and I were both California natives, and our children were born there, Laguna Beach, California. And then I, as a profession, I was a high school counselor and a teacher. So for 30 years of that. And after retirement, we did a lot of traveling. And my wife died about a year ago. My son, who works for hospice and lives close by here now, I called him up from San Antonio, Texas, and said, find me a place to live. He came here, he met Amy, had a nice tour of the place. Amy bought him lunch and his wife, my daughter-in-law, and the 2 grandkids. And he was just entranced by the place and called me up and said, I got you a place to live. It's all set. So here I am.
Well, I think you're quite a find for a couple free lunches.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool. So San Antonio to here, weather-wise, what's your takeaway? You've been here for a bit now. You listen to news and so many things. What's your transition
I'm
to
really
this?
liking Virginia. Flying over Virginia, I was just amazed by the greenery and down below. It looked like nobody lives here. This is all Sherwood Forest. I mean, that's the way I was impressed by it. And now that I'm here at the Chesapeake, if I were to write a story about my experience at the Chesapeake, I would include this wonderful walk on Bay Haven Street, the half-mile circumnavigation of the main buildings, and the trees and the birds and the geese flying overhead. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. So I too, right before I came here, I was 7 weeks in Texas. I was Fort Worth. I was helping an organization out there, the Staten, and I actually had helped select, and we were bringing on a new executive director, and I was mentoring him and getting it started. And then had this opportunity, said, oh, I guess I can try Virginia. Let me check it out. And having lived in Hawaii, in Chicago, and Pennsylvania, and even Texas, this has been my favorite. There's so many uniquenesses around this area, and the greenery you mentioned, absolutely. The water, I love the history, like the military. There's a lot of good things that sometimes I think locals take for granted. Fantastic. Well, you said if you could write a story about the Chesapeake, well, I hope you do. And I know right now you're inspiring some others to write, and you took this whole invitation that Candace and others have put out to say, we would love to see residents start clubs. And you've got one going. So let's
Yes,
hear more
yes.
about that and tell me the club that you've started.
Well, I'd like to talk. I really like to talk about the Chesapeake Creative Writing Club, as we call it. And I think on our first meeting, and you were one of the guys that suggested this, let's find out what the group wants to do in the writing projects. So we started with something I felt everyone could write about, not the creative vein necessarily, but to talk about their experience at the Chesapeake. And then we are moving on. So our next meeting, which will be in October, on October 10th, Monday, October 10th at 11 to 12 in the Explorer Room. And we're going to be talking about the short story. And the members of the
Club.
writing club are in the meantime are working on their first short stories.
So now define short story.
Well, I'm going to get back to that a little bit.
Okay.
Defining a short story. Well, okay. Over the years, I've talked to people who say, I really can't write. You know, I love to read, but I can't write. And I found out that if they try it, sometimes it's amazing how much they really can write and how well they can do it and how creative they can be. So anyway, the short story, and I'm going to read you a little blurb that when I attended a conference with, what's his name? I'll get to that.
Okay.
A famous writer who talked about how to write a short story.
Okay.
So anyway, some of the other topics that we are going to be doing are composition topics, are poetry, one-act plays, autobiographies, my own obituary, memoirs, and possibly some kind of an inspirational piece. What comes to my mind is Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, inspirational. Okay, so
I have to ask this question. When I hear these different future assignments, and I hear about, life stories, and I hear about a one-act play, is there an opportunity for Candace to be scheduling some type of program where people are reading or talking further? I know it'd be with the author's permission, but I just have to believe there's going to be some magic created here.
Well, possibly.
And how to share that.
Let's see how it develops. My own experience with one-act plays is they might as well be a short story.
Yeah.
Because they kind of read that way. To me, a one-act play, to be successful, it has to have almost all dialogue.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk all the time. And that's, as a writer, that's what you have to write down. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
But I do want to start out by reading a couple of the examples of my Chesapeake experience. And this one is a short one, so it'll go fast if you don't mind me reading it. This is by Frankie Bissett. And it goes, "The Chesapeake has been my happy place for nearly 8 years. I have found it to be a very friendly and warm atmosphere, and I'm glad I came. I wake up mornings knowing that if I want to busy myself that day, there are usually several choices from which I can choose. Anything from exercise, swimming, card games, arts and crafts, programs on different subjects, occasional movies, and the library is always open, and if push comes to shove, there's always bingo. New friends are always around and about. On the other hand, if I wake up mornings and don't feel like being busy that day, I don't have to. After all, our slogan is, freedom lives here. We are free to choose how busy or not to be busy. as we choose. I love that, and I don't have to vacuum my floors anymore or cook unless I choose to. Then there is the clinic if you need them, assisted living, mental health, and care, and health care. The Chesapeake has been a good name for itself, has made a good name for itself through the years. That is why people are waiting to get in. Bravo for the Chesapeake. Frankie Bissett.
Very nice story.
I thought so.
Boy, I think you got some scholar students.
Well, she did a good job. But now this next one that actually, Susan Cowling was supposed to be here to kind of do her own presentation. But she ate dinner with someone who had COVID-19 recently, and she's now in quarantine.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, I talked to her and said, well, maybe I could hit the highlights of your paper, which is entitled, Who Was Harper Anyway? And I think she did a really nice job of getting into some of the history of the Chesapeake. And she starts out with, what does the word Chesapeake mean? Either a large body of inland water or the name of any city adjacent to Norfolk. Right? Wrong. Chesapeake really is the name of a Native American tribe centered in the area we now call the peninsula. But there's Harpersville. That certainly doesn't sound like it has something to do with Native Americans. Where does it come from? And who was Harper anyway? And how did the Chesapeake, our residents, come to be here? Well, a little bit about that. With considerable help from two couples who currently reside at the Chesapeake and bits and pieces of information from others, I think I may have pieced together the answer. Nancy and Vestal Lewis moved into the Newport area of the Chesapeake recently. Their daughter, who lives on Post Street in Hilton, is the granddaughter of Elizabeth Page Harper Wyatt, who was the daughter of Roland Wade Harper and his wife. Roland was the sixth child of the first Harpers who came here in 1894. And what do you think Nancy's and Vestal's daughter is named? Harper. In 1894, James Franklin Harper and his wife, Ida Blanche Seal Harper, arrived in the Lower Peninsula with their 4 children. And I'm skipping on down now. Ida Blanche was known as Mrs. Harper, received a gift from her family. A gift of $483.63 to be exact, all of which she and her husband spent on 31.44 acres of farmland. Sometime later, they bought another 400 acres for $850. This made a very nice sized farm. The Harpers found this to be a perfect location, and I'm skipping ahead here, for a country store. Managed by their oldest son, Charles Lear Harper, it carried a little bit of everything a farmer may need, and later on even sold Hackney wagons and Model T Fords. The store prospered, as did the farm and the family. The Harper store became the post office for the area, which by that time was called Harpersville. And then moving on ahead here, the Harpers passed along to their oldest daughter, Ethel Harper Revere, 17 acres, which is exactly the property where the Chesapeake now sits. And then moving on down, the farm expanded from the original 17 acres. It now produced potatoes, corn, watermelon, cantaloupes on some 30 to 40 acres. The Reveres were Baptists, and they became aware that there was interest in building a retirement home for the Baptists. The Reveres sold their land, which then became the Baptist home. And to end this thing, the official opening date was 1969. Well, I thought Susan did an excellent job of kind of research, oral history, and writing about her, the history of the Chesapeake.
Well, I too read that in full a short while ago. Susan had shared a copy with me,
Yes.
and most fascinated with it. And the thoughts that came to mind was several. One, just thinking of the original acreage to 40, questioning, I wonder if our funny farm today is still on tillable ground that was once farmed, and it's just been farmed forever. Could be.
Could be.
I want to put Susan in touch with Hunter Riggins. Hunter was chairman of the board of VBH in the 60s. And the story is, I can add to it. At one point, Hunter and the board had a signed agreement to purchase the land across the street where the Korean church was. And that came into the 12th hour when he pulled that agreement, conversed with his family, and made the decision to buy on this side of the street. So that's an added piece that I want Susan to get more details on, but I've heard that story from Hunter Riggins, who today is just a delight to talk with, and I'm sure we'll have him over for lunch sometime and maybe connect Susan and him.
Well, I wish you would follow through on that.
Yeah.
I also wanted to mention a story that I call a story, but it's her Chesapeake experience by Jane Strebel. And it's called I Am Still Me. And it's going to appear, I think, in the next issue of the Chesapeake Connections. So look for that on, I think, the back cover of that magazine that we all like to read. So I'm not going to tell you much about her composition. You can read for yourself, and it's nicely done. Well, I want to move on to briefly about what our current project is more about. The writer that I was I was fumbling for his name, the science fiction writer Ray Bradbury.
Sure.
My wife and I got a chance to go to a presentation. He was the guest speaker. This was in Southern California. And he was asked the question, well, how do I write a good short story? And this was his answer. If you want to learn how to become a good writer, you should compose a short story every day. If you do that, he said, by the end of the year, you'll have 365 stories. And at the very least, 3 or 4 of them are bound to be good, because it's impossible to write 365 bad stories. I thought that was kind of a nice, humorous answer.
And when I hear Ray Bradbury, I'm thinking of Star Trek.
The Martian Chronicles and Fahrenheit 451, and lots of short stories. So not the Star Wars or Star Trek.
That must be a different name.
Yes.
Thinking. Okay.
But anyway, I think his main message was practice makes perfect. You need to write short stories, and you'll get better at it the more you do it. So what I did is I assigned, I being an old die-in-the-wool school teacher. Sometimes I sound like a school teacher to the Chesapeake Writing Club members. But I said, I'd like for you to write 3 stories before our next meeting, and then we'll go over them in our meeting. So that's what's up. And that pretty much does it for where we are and where we're headed.
Well, it looks like you've got some enthusiastic students, fellow residents that are really engaged with what you're doing. That's great. From this, I hope if there's some other residents that have interest, okay for them to tag along and join in?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. I said our next meeting is October 10th, Monday, in the Explorer Room at 11 a.m. And it's an open door situation. If you are a resident and you haven't been to one of our meetings and you're curious about it, please join us. Just come in. You'll hear some of the short stories read, and we'll be talking about them, and you can join in the discussion. So you're welcome, and we hope to see you there.
Yeah. Well, something, hopefully I'm not tipping off to your students, but I remember when you and I were first talking about this, you shared with me that, stories can be a variety of lengths. And I think I remember you telling me and showed me examples of even a 25-word short story. And you had read to me some examples, and I was amazed about how I still was transformed. With a
But let
few
me correct
words.
you, David, because I've actually run contests on this, and that's, can you write a short story in 55 words
55?
or less?
Okay.
And that sounds like a lot of words, but it isn't. And it's a challenge. And that may be one of the short story projects that we evolve into.
So 55 is the number. I guess I was
55.
just thinking you could do it quicker.
Well, I can even do better than that. They say that Ernest Hemingway wrote a novel in 6 words. And I don't want to tell you what those 6 words were right now, but I'll share it sometime in the future.
Fantastic. Real fine. Well, John, I think that you have absolutely engaged more people to be interested in their creative spirits and writing, and certainly appreciate you being with us today, sharing some of those stories. And I wouldn't be surprised if Candace invites you back to another edition and catches up in the future, or
Well,
perhaps some of your students.
It's been a real pleasure to be here.
Hey, thanks, John.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day.